The late afternoon sun poured over the football field in soft, golden streaks, turning every cap and gown into shimmering silhouettes. The crowd roared as names were called, parents waved posters, and the brass band played a triumphant march that echoed against the bleachers. It should have been a perfect moment. I gripped my diploma case, its edges biting into my palms, and scanned the stands for faces I cared about. My friends were somewhere in the sea of graduates snapping photos and tossing caps into the air. I should have been with them, laughing, feeling that rush of possibility that comes with being 18 and free. Instead, my chest felt tight. My eyes kept wandering toward Sandra. She stood at the edge of the field, polished and pristine as always, her silk blouse glowing faintly in the evening light. Her blonde hair was swept into a perfect bun that seemed to defy gravity, her lipstick a sharp red that matched her nails. She looked more like she belonged at a country club than at a high school graduation. And she was smiling. That tight, rehearsed smile I knew too well. The one that always came before bad news. "Amanda," she called, beckoning me over with a curl of her fingers. Her bracelets clinked like tiny warning bells. I hesitated. My friends waved for me to join them for group photos, but Sandra's gaze pinned me in place. Reluctantly, I walked toward her, the grass crunching under my shoes. She placed a manicured hand on my arm and leaned in slightly, as if we were sharing a sweet family secret. But her eyes were flat. "Sweetheart," she said in a syrupy tone, "I need you to know something." I swallowed, my heart thudding. "The college fund your father left behind," she continued, "won't be yours after all." The words fell out of her mouth like stones dropping into water. Ripples of shock spread through me, each one heavier than the last. "What?" I whispered. The sound barely escaped my lips. Sandra tilted her head as if I were a slow child. "It's been decided. Ian and I talked about it and we think it would be better used elsewhere. Ian has a plan for the money. Something practical." My mouth went dry.
No.
That's not possible. Dad told me. He set that fund up for me when I was little. For college. For my future. Sandra's lips curved, but it wasn't kindness. It was condescension. "Amanda, you've always been such a dreamer. College isn't the right fit for everyone. Ian, on the other hand, has ambition. He'll use it to start a business, build something real. It's what your father would have wanted, to be smart with the money." The roar of the crowd around us faded until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. I wanted to argue, scream, collapse, but before I could even form a response, Ian strolled over. He was 21, tall with Dad's dark hair, but none of his warmth. His graduation from the same school had been 2 years earlier, and Sandra was still bragging about how he'd aced it all. He wore an expensive shirt, sleeves rolled just so, the kind of casual arrogance you couldn't buy but could certainly inherit from endless praise. "What's going on?" Ian asked, though his smirk told me he already knew. Sandra touched his arm like he was a prize. "I was just explaining to Amanda about the college fund." Ian's grin widened.
Right.
"Amanda, you'll understand. I'm going to invest it, maybe real estate, maybe tech. I haven't decided yet. But trust me, it'll pay off. Dad would have wanted us to think long-term, not waste it on student loans. Besides," he added with a casual shrug, "you can always take out loans like everyone else. If college is really that important to you." The casual cruelty in his voice made my throat burn. "You can't just take what's mine," I blurted, louder than I intended. My hands trembled as I clutched the diploma case tighter. That money was for me. Dad wanted me to go to college. Sandra's smile faltered. She glanced around nervously. Parents and students were starting to look. She leaned in close, her voice sharp. "Lower your voice, Amanda. Don't make a scene. This is family business, and you're being dramatic." Dramatic. My vision blurred with unshed tears. "You're stealing from me. Both of you." Ian rolled his eyes, the grin never leaving his face. "Relax. Don't be so selfish. We're thinking of the family." Family. The word sliced through me like glass. I wanted to scream until my voice broke. Instead, my body chose survival. I turned and walked away, my steps quick, the world spinning. My gown snagged against the bleachers as I pushed past clusters of parents with balloons, their laughter ringing in my ears like cruel mockery. Graduation day. The day that was supposed to mark a beginning had become the day everything fell apart. A house without Dad. That night, the house felt colder than usual. I sat on my bed in the dim glow of the lamp, still wearing the necklace Dad had given me on my 16th birthday, a tiny silver heart that rested just above my collarbone. I traced it with my fingers, remembering the way he used to call me Mandy when no one else did. My cap and gown were draped carelessly over the chair, the fabric wrinkled. The diploma case sat unopened on my desk. I should have been celebrating with friends, maybe sneaking into a late-night diner, laughing about the future. Instead, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in endless circles, thinking about how Sandra had yanked the floor out from beneath me. It had only been a year since Dad passed away. The grief still came in waves, sometimes soft, like a whisper of memory when I smelled his aftershave, sometimes sharp, like a knife when I realized he wasn't there to see me graduate. But the hardest part wasn't just missing him. It was how everything had changed without him. Sandra had always been cold, but when Dad was alive, she kept her cruelty wrapped in layers of politeness. He had been the buffer, the balance. With him gone, she had the power. And Ian had her approval like a crown on his head. I remembered being 12, sitting with Dad in his study as he opened a folder thick with papers. His voice was calm but purposeful. "This is your college fund, Mandy," he'd said, ruffling my hair. "It'll grow over time, and when you graduate, you'll be ready for whatever university you choose. I don't care if it's across the state or across the country. You'll have options." Back then, I believed him. I believed that future was guaranteed. Now, Sandra's words echoed in my head. "It's not yours after all." The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee from her favorite porcelain mug. The smell of hazelnut creamer filled the air. She was scrolling on her phone, her robe tied neatly around her waist. I stood there for a moment, gathering courage. "Sandra," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk about the college fund." She sighed as if I were a toddler demanding candy. Setting her mug down, she looked at me with weary impatience. "Amanda," I already explained. "The money is being used for the family, which includes Ian." My jaw clenched. That money was for me. Dad told me. He set it up for my education. Sandra rolled her eyes, the gesture sharp. "Amanda, you're an adult now. It's time to grow up and figure things out for yourself. Life isn't fair. You can't expect everything to be handed to you. You'll thank me one day when you realize how impractical your little dreams were." Her words sliced, each one sharper than the last. The summer after graduation was the kind that stuck to your skin, hot, heavy, and suffocating. Most of my classmates were preparing for their new lives, posting dorm shopping hauls, acceptance letters, roommate introductions. My social media feed was a parade of smiling faces holding university banners. I deleted the app after a week. I couldn't take it. Instead, I worked. The diner on Maple Street smelled like fried onions and burnt coffee, and the tips weren't great, but it was a job. I'd started bussing tables during my junior year, and after graduation, the manager gave me more hours. The uniform was a stiff white shirt that always smelled faintly of grease, and the shoes left blisters on my heels, but at least it meant a paycheck. That's where Mark found me one night. It was close to midnight, and I was wiping down the counter, my back aching. Most of the chairs were stacked upside down on tables. Mark walked in, wearing a faded hoodie, his dark hair messy from work. He had the kind of smile that could soften even the hardest day. "Hey, Mandy," he said, sliding into a booth like he had all the time in the world. I groaned, dropping into the seat across from him. "You know we're closed, right?" "Yeah, but I also know you can sneak me a slice of pie, if I ask nicely." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the corner of my mouth twitching upward. "You're impossible." He grinned. "And hungry." I fetched him a slice of blueberry pie and watched him dig in like he hadn't eaten in days. Mark worked at the auto shop across town, pulling double shifts to save money for his own future. We'd been friends since middle school, bonded over late-night study sessions and our shared love of bad horror movies. But that summer, something shifted. One night, after walking me home, we sat on the curb outside my house, the street lamp casting long shadows. Sandra's car wasn't in the driveway. She and Ian were out late, as usual. Mark leaned back on his hands, staring at the stars. "So, what's the plan now?" he asked softly. The question hit me like a brick. I hugged my knees to my chest. There is no plan. No money, no college. Sandra made sure of that.
His jaw tightened.
She's really just keeping it? Like it's hers? I nodded, staring at the cracks in the pavement. Mark let out a low whistle. That's cold. I swallowed hard, fighting the sting in my eyes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Everyone else has a future. I just have this. I gestured vaguely at the house, the dark windows, the weight of disappointment pressing down on me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Mark shifted closer, his voice steady. "You're not stuck, Mandy. You're stronger than they think. You'll figure it out. I know you." I shook my head. "You don't know how hard it feels. How small they make me feel."
Mark reached for my hand.
His palm was rough, calloused from hours at the shop, but warm. "Then I'll remind you, every single day if I have to. You're not small. You're not broken. You're Amanda Hayes, and you're gonna make it. With or without their money." The lump in my throat finally broke. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I laughed through them. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," he said with a half smile. "We just take it one step at a time." That night, under the glow of the street lamp, I made a silent vow. If Dad's money was gone, fine. If Sandra and Ian wanted to see me fail, fine. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. The fall semester came, and while my classmates were decorating dorm rooms, I was registering at the local community college. It wasn't glamorous. The campus was small, a cluster of brick buildings next to a strip mall. My classmates were single moms, veterans, kids who couldn't afford a university. People like me. I worked the morning shift at the diner, rushed to classes in the afternoon, then pulled late-night hours at the library shelving books. My backpack was heavy with used textbooks, the covers taped and worn. Sometimes I'd fall asleep on the bus, my notebook sliding off my lap. Other times I'd cry in the bathroom between shifts, exhausted and overwhelmed. Sandra never asked how I was doing. Ian never offered a ride when I walked home in the rain. One night, I stumbled in at nearly 2 a.m., shoes soaked through, my clothes clinging to me from a storm. Sandra was waiting in the kitchen, sipping wine. She raised an eyebrow. "Rough night." I set my backpack down, water dripping onto the tile. I worked a double. Then the bus was late. Sandra tilted her head, her lips curving into that same thin smile. "Maybe this is a sign, Amanda. Maybe you're not cut out for all this. Community college, jobs, it seems like too much. Why put yourself through it? You could just work full-time and stop chasing this fantasy." Her words burned like acid. I wanted to scream that it wasn't a fantasy, that it was survival, that I had dreams she could never crush. But instead, I just walked past her, my wet shoes squeaking on the stairs. In my room, I collapsed on the bed, tears streaming down my face.
It was Mark who kept me going.
He'd meet me at the diner after my shifts, bringing me hot chocolate when my hands were too tired to stop shaking. He'd quiz me on flashcards before exams, his goofy encouragement making me laugh even when I wanted to give up. One night, after I got my first A in college algebra, I showed him the paper, my hands trembling. "See," he said, beaming. "Told you. One step at a time." And for the first time in months, I believed him. Chapter 5. Humiliation and Resolve. Not everyone was rooting for me. Ian made sure of that. He'd started hanging out at expensive bars with Sandra's friends, bragging about his business ventures. One weekend, I ran into him while bussing tables at a restaurant downtown. He spotted me immediately, his smirk spreading like wildfire. He was surrounded by friends, all dressed in sleek suits, glasses of whiskey in hand. "Hey, everyone," Ian said loudly, waving toward me. "This is my sister, Amanda." She's working her way through, what is it again? Oh, right, community college. The group chuckled politely, their eyes flicking over my stained apron and tired face. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to smile.
Good evening.
Can I take your order? Ian leaned back in his chair, his grin infuriatingly smug. She's always been the overachiever, you know. Wants to be a big-shot lawyer or something. Without Dad's money, though, he trailed off, laughing as if it were the funniest joke in the world. The humiliation was suffocating. I wanted to crawl into the floor, disappear. But I didn't. I straightened my shoulders, pen poised over my notepad. What can I get for you? I asked evenly, refusing to let my voice shake. Later that night, when I finally clocked out, I sat on the bus and let the tears fall. The city lights blurred through the window. But beneath the pain was something else. Anger. Not the kind that burned out quickly, but the kind that simmered deep, fueling something stronger. Ian could laugh. Sandra could doubt me. They could take Dad's money, mock my efforts, make me feel small. But they couldn't stop me. That night, I wrote it down in my journal, pressing the pen so hard it nearly tore the page. I will rise. Not for them. Not for their approval. But for me. Life turned into a series of alarms. The first one rang at 5:30 a.m. I'd drag myself out of bed, throw on my diner uniform, and catch the earliest bus to make it in time to brew coffee before the morning rush. By the time I clocked out at 10, I smelled like bacon grease and cheap syrup, my hair sticking to the back of my neck. From there, I'd sprint to my classes at the community college. I'd sit in lecture halls with my notebook open, trying to focus while my stomach growled and my eyelids drooped. And at night, the library. The library job was quieter, shelving books, helping students print assignments, checking IDs. But the silence had a way of making me feel invisible. Sometimes I'd lean against the circulation desk, staring at the rows of books, wondering if I'd ever escape this cycle. It wasn't glamorous. There were nights I'd collapse onto my bed without eating, still in my uniform. Days when my hands shook from too much caffeine and too little sleep. The worst part wasn't the exhaustion. It was the loneliness. I couldn't talk to Sandra. Every interaction with her was a performance, her reminding me how unrealistic my dreams were, me biting my tongue to avoid another fight. Ian was even worse. He seemed to enjoy reminding me of how far behind I was. It felt like carrying the weight of an entire world on my back with no one to help me lift it. Mark never made me feel small. He'd show up at the diner after his shifts, grease still on his hands, sliding into a booth with that easy smile of his. Sometimes he'd bring sandwiches he'd made himself, insisting I take half because I never had time to eat. One Friday night, after a double shift, he convinced me to skip the bus. We walked instead, the air cool and crisp, the street lights buzzing overhead. "You're gonna burn out if you keep this pace," he said, his hands shoved into his hoodie pocket. "I don't have a choice," I replied, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. "If I don't work, I can't afford books. If I don't study, I fail. If I fail, then Sandra wins. And I can't let that happen." Mark glanced at me, his brow furrowed. "You're allowed to rest, you know." I let out a bitter laugh. Rest doesn't pay tuition. We stopped at the corner by the old gas station. Mark reached out and gently took my hands in his thumbs brushing against my knuckles.
His voice softened.
"I don't care what Sandra says. Or Ian. You're not weak, Mandy. You're the strongest person I know. But even strong people need someone to lean on." I felt my throat tighten. No one had said that to me before. Not Sandra.
Not Ian.
Not even Dad, in the same way. For a long moment, I just looked at him. The flickering streetlight above cast half his face in shadow, but his eyes were steady, clear. Something shifted inside me. I leaned forward, almost without realizing it, and he met me halfway. The kiss was soft, hesitant at first, but real. A promise more than a spark. When we pulled back, both of us were smiling, nervous, and sure all at once. That night, for the first time in months, the weight on my shoulders felt a little lighter. Except Mark. Sandra loved hosting parties. To her, nothing mattered more than appearances. A perfectly set dining table, hors d'oeuvres arranged like they belonged in a magazine spread, Ian smiling at her side like a prize trophy. It was her ritual of control, a way to remind the world that she and her son were thriving. But cracks were starting to show. At one such party, I stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. Mark had convinced me to come, telling me it would look peaceful if I at least showed up for family gatherings. My gut had warned me otherwise. I wasn't wrong. Sandra floated from guest to guest, her laugh a little too high-pitched, her lipstick a little too smudged. She was dressed elegantly, but there was something frantic in the way she clutched her wine glass, as though it were a lifeline. Ian was bragging as always. I've got investors lined up. We're scaling faster than anyone expected. Honestly, I might not even need a degree. Real success isn't in classrooms, it's in taking risks. A middle-aged man raised a polite eyebrow. And what's your profit margin looking like? Ian stammered. He covered it quickly with a laugh, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty. Sandra jumped in, patting his arm. Don't worry about numbers. Ian's business is cutting edge. You'll all be reading about it soon. Her words were sugar-coated desperation. And the more she talked, the more I realized something. They weren't as untouchable as they wanted me to believe. The next day, I overheard her on the phone while picking up some papers I'd left in the living room. Her voice was tight, hushed, almost panicked. Yes, I understand the payment is overdue. No, I just need a little more time. My son's company is about to take off. We'll be fine. Just please don't. The call ended abruptly when she noticed me standing there. She froze, mask slipping for half a second before she forced a smile. Eavesdropping, Amanda? No, I said flatly, turning away. But inside, something hardened. Maybe their empire wasn't built on gold after all. My life, meanwhile, was still chaos. 2 jobs, endless classes, and studying in 20-minute bursts whenever I could steal time. But one email changed everything. It was from a small local marketing firm. I'd applied weeks earlier, almost as a joke. I didn't think I had a chance with my resume full of coffee shops and bookstores. Dear Amanda Parker, we are pleased to offer you a paid internship position. I sat staring at the screen, tears blurring the words. A paid internship. Real-world experience. A stepping stone out of survival mode. Mark found me in the library later, my hands still shaking. I shoved the laptop toward him. Read this. He scanned the email, then broke into a grin. He didn't even say anything at first. He just picked me up, spinning me in the middle of the quiet study lounge. Mark. I laughed, swatting at him. We're in a library. I don't care, he whispered, eyes bright. I knew you'd get it. I knew it. The internship didn't magically solve everything. The pay was barely enough to cover one of my part-time jobs, and the workload was intense. But it was a start. I remember my first day walking into that office. The faint smell of coffee, the hum of computers, the glass-walled conference rooms. I was terrified. But the first time I presented a marketing pitch to a client and saw them nod in approval, something bloomed inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I belonged here. Of course, life has a way of testing you right when you think you're standing tall. It was finals week. I'd been working nights at the coffee shop, days at the internship, and studying in between. My laptop, my old, loyal machine I'd had since high school, gave out 2 days before my biggest paper was due. The screen went black.
Just like that.
I sat there in the campus lounge, jabbing the power button over and over, whispering, please, not now. Please. Nothing. I didn't have money for a new one. Rent was due. My car insurance payment was pending. I was already skipping meals to make ends meet.
Panic clawed at my chest.
I borrowed an ancient laptop from a friend. It was so slow I could barely open Word without it freezing. I spent hours in the library, watching the cursor lag, every second a reminder of how unfair it all was. At midnight, I broke. My head fell into my hands and I sobbed, silent but uncontrollable. All I could think was, Sandra and Ian would laugh if they saw me now. They'd say I was proving them right, that I wasn't cut out for success. But then I remembered my dad's voice, faint but steady in the back of my mind. You're stronger than you think, Amanda. And Mark's too. You're allowed to stumble, but you're not going to fall. So I kept going. The paper wasn't my best, but I turned it in on time. I passed. Barely, but I passed. That night, walking home with exhaustion weighing me down, I realized something profound. Every setback hurt, but each time I got back up, I was proving them wrong. Not with words, with persistence. And persistence, I decided, was going to be my weapon. Time has a strange way of moving. Some days dragged like they would never end, but then suddenly months passed, and I realized how much had changed. The internship that once terrified me became a place where my ideas mattered. I learned fast, quicker than even I expected, because I had no choice but to learn. Failure wasn't an option when rent and survival depended on my success. Soon my boss started asking for my input in meetings. Clients began remembering my name. One of them, after a presentation, leaned across the table and said, "You've got something sharp in you. Don't let anyone dull it." Those words stayed with me. At the same time, Sandra and Ian's glittering mask was beginning to slip in public. Rumors swirled. The fast-growing business Ian bragged about was missing deadlines. Investors were pulling out. Money wasn't flowing the way he claimed. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances. His arrogance was starting to backfire. He had borrowed money, too much, promising returns that never came. Sandra still threw parties, but they grew smaller, thinner, her smiles more forced. She drank more, laughed louder, as if volume could cover the truth. I wasn't gloating, at least not openly, but inside, a fire burned. I remembered every cruel word, every time they told me I didn't matter. And now, for the first time, the balance was shifting. My own life was far from easy. Balancing the internship with school and part-time jobs left me exhausted, but slowly, I felt the weight lifting. I finished my degree. That day, standing in my cap and gown, looking out into the small crowd where Mark cheered louder than anyone, I felt something inside me settle. Sandra and Ian hadn't shown up, of course. They wouldn't have wanted to see me stand on a stage.
But I didn't need them there.
Their absence only confirmed what I already knew. My victories were mine, carved from battles they'd never see. After graduation, I was offered a full-time position at the firm. It didn't pay much at first, but it was steady. It was professional. It was a door to a world they had tried to lock me out of. I walked through it proudly. Meanwhile, Ian stumbled. His business collapsed under debts and empty promises. I heard through mutual contacts that he was begging for loans, using Sandra's connections to scrape together cash. Sandra herself faced humiliation. People who once adored her at parties stopped returning her calls. They weren't interested in a woman who couldn't maintain the illusion of wealth and power. Slowly, her perfect image crumbled. And through it all, I kept climbing. Promotions came little by little. I wasn't the smartest in the room, but I was the one who refused to stop learning, the one who showed up early and stayed late. I built a reputation for resilience. People respected me because I had no safety net, and I still stood tall. There was one night, years later, that burned itself into my memory. I was walking home from the office, city lights glittering, my heels clicking against the pavement. My phone buzzed. It was Sandra. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. "Amanda," she said, her tone softer than I had ever heard. I need a favor." I stopped in my tracks. The woman who had spent her life reminding me I was nothing was now asking me for help. She rambled about bills, about Ian's debts, about how hard things had become. Her voice cracked at one point, though she quickly masked it with a laugh. For a moment I said nothing. I just listened. The silence stretched. Then I said calmly, "I can't help you." She snapped then, her old venom surfacing. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" "No," I said. "I don't need to be better than you. I just need to be free from you." And I hung up. That night, I sat by my window, looking out at the skyline. For the first time in my life, I felt light. Not because I had money or success, though I had built enough to stand secure, but because I had finally broken the chain of their control. They couldn't touch me anymore. Their voices no longer lived in my head. Mark sat beside me, taking my hand. He didn't say anything because he didn't need to. He had seen the whole journey, from the nights I cried over broken laptops to the moment I answered Sandra with strength in my voice.
He knew what it meant.
Life didn't become perfect after that. It never does. There were still struggles, losses, disappointments. But none of them crushed me the way they once might have. Because I knew who I was now. Sandra and Ian faded into the background, shadows of people who once thought they could define me. Their empire of pride had crumbled. Mine, built on resilience and persistence, was still standing. And in the quiet moments, when I looked back, I realized the truth. Their cruelty had not destroyed me. It had shaped me, forged me, sharpened me into someone unbreakable. They had tried to bury me. Instead, they planted me. And I had grown.